Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be taking a look at a brand new album here from 2023. I'm going to be looking at the new one by Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds Cancel Skies. So I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, showing you my vinyl and also the CD copy of the album, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So this is Noel Gallagher's fourth post-Oasis album, like High Flying Birds. Like his previous album had been all the way back in 2017, which was called Who Built the Moon, which at the time was a bit of a departure for Noel, taking in electronic music and kind of dance sounds, and he followed that up with a series of EPs in a similar vein, and then a greatest hits collection in 2021, what celebrated 10 years of his solo career, and I guess in some ways indicated the kind of sort of closure of one chapter in lagging his solo career. Also in the intervening years, he'd had a few changes in his personal life as well. He and his wife of some 20 years, Sarah McDonald, got divorced. So I think while most of this album was written before that was announced, I think some of the tracks on here do certainly have a very mellow feel to them, and I think Noel has said that the difficulties he was facing at the time impacted the direction and feel of the album. So for this album, Noel was reunited with Paul Stacey as co-producer and engineer. He was someone that he has worked with since the Oasis days, and the lion's share of the album was recorded at his new home studio called Lone Star Studios, which he'd been busy building over the lockdown period. There were also various string overdubs on this album. There's a lot of orchestration on here. That was all done at Abbey Road Studios. And also interestingly as well, for the first time on one of his solo or High Flying Birds albums, he's actually got the High Flying Birds, his touring band, playing on the vast bulk of these tracks. Most of his other solo albums have got, it's either just him playing all the instruments, or he's getting in the odd session musician here and there. Whereas on this album, it is much more of a collective sort of band album. So far the critical reception has been pretty positive for the album. Many publications calling it his best solo record, whether there is the usual kind of moody reviews from people who think they're a bit too cool for kind of Noel Gallagher, or think he's just a bit too common. I don't know, but yeah, I've seen a few 2-3 star reviews of it, but generally it has been quite a positive reception. There's no chart placings for it yet, as I'm filming this at the start of the first week it's been out, so we'll get the chart placings on Friday. But I would be very, very, very surprised if it didn't hit number one. I mean, every single other album that he's put out, either as Oasis or solo, has reached number one, so I would be very shocked if this one didn't manage it. So I will just show you, my vinyl copy and also the CD of it here. So this is the deluxe CD here, and it's also the deluxe vinyl I got as well here, just on a bundle. So this is quite nicely packaged here. It's just a little booklet here, and I love the artwork on this. I love the cover to begin with. I think it's a great cover. It's taken at it was the centre circle of the main road stadium, which was his football club Man City's original stadium, and also where Oasis played a couple of their most iconic gigs in the mid-90s. And you've got a lot of great pictures taken in and around kind of the Manchester area here, and then all the lyrics there as well to all of the tracks. And this, as I said, is a double CD version, so you get a ton of bonus tracks there. And then he also released this deluxe vinyl, which is incredibly thick. It's a 3 LP set. So what you get with this is, well, we also got with this bundle a sort of a lyric printout as well, which is just printed. You can tell it's a little bit blurry. It's not the best quality thing, but I guess it's a fun thing to include with orders from his online store. So again, there's the cover, there's the back cover there. I like this back cover. I think it's one of the, I was going to say it's one of the first albums he's featured on, but certainly he was on the cover of what was it, Chasing Yesterday, as well. So but no, it's nice to see him on the back. This opens up. It's a fold here. So again, just lyrics, and what you get in here is the actual full album. So yeah, it's just the 10-track album which we'll be looking at today. You also get as well a collection of like, I think there's a few remixes on here and instrumental tracks, but you also get 3 kind of bonus tracks like as well, like on here. So you get songs there, Don't Stop, which was a Oasis demo which they'd put out a couple of years ago, but I think he's maybe overdubbed a few bits and pieces like onto it here, but I think it's a really good song. And then you've also got like We're Gonna Get There in the End, which he'd released I think at the end of 2020 possibly. It was a kind of song that he'd kind of put out I think during like the pandemic, and it's a great song, and they've worked it up here, and this version is just stunning. I think it should have been on the album. I think it is on all versions of the album, but just as like a bonus track. So it's yeah, it is definitely separate from the core album, but it is such a good song then. And then you've also got a cover of John Lennon's Mind Games as well, which I'm not sure why he'd recorded that. I think he said that he'd done it for like a kind of tribute album, which maybe never quite materialised, but it's just great to get like the full version, like the proper version, like off like it on here, because it is a really, really great version. And then you get another disc, so it's a 3 LP set, like as I said, another disc in here which has more remixes, and then a live BBC session as well, which is brilliant. He did it in towards the end of 21, promoting the the greatest hits album, and you've got fantastic versions of Flying on the Ground, like his premiere live version, like off like Live Forever, like he'd never done it live before, like up to that point, and then also a great Bob Dylan cover, You Ain't Going Nowhere. So yeah, a really great like actually a really good value for money package just as well. I think this was about it was about £40 like for like this triple vinyl, which I thought was like really good value. Okay, so I'm now going to go over each of the album songs in detail. I will score each track out of 10 and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. The first track is I'm Not Giving Up Tonight, which is a really great opener. It's quite laid back, I think. You know, it's very acoustic. You've got some really interesting like percussion going on. Gives it a very easy-going kind of late 60s, early 70s feel. I could easily imagine like George Harrison doing this song like on like one of his solo albums, and it's just got a really nice feel to it. It manages to be both intimate but also expansive like at the same time. You've got an orchestra here, you've got horns, you've got a great kind of chorus like of like backing singers like as well, but also very intimate as well. I think kind of through like the lyrics, which have a kind of slightly mystical feel to them, like the good lady says she's waiting for me, she's up on her bed as high as she can be, she's grooving to the sound of the music is all. And then that chorus is just really defiant, like that I'm not giving up tonight bit. It's just really optimistic, sets the album off like on like a great tone, I think. So yeah, for me like I'm Not Giving Up Tonight would get a 10 out of 10.
You tell me that you want it, yeah, yeah.
Next up is Pretty Boy. Now this was the lead-off single. I think this was released all the way back in October, November last year, and I must say even at the time I was never too taken with it, and I still think it is one of the weaker tracks like on the album. It's also a collaboration with Johnny Marr, and I guess I would have expected these two great sort of titans of kind of like music to be able to come up with something a bit stronger than this. Personally, it's just a bit boring for me, this song. You know, you've got like there's a kind of like the bass is like the main sort of like propulsion to the song, and it's almost difficult like in a way to make out Johnny Marr like on like this track here. Like he doesn't really assert himself like on this song. Noel has said that this was him trying to write a Cure song, or it kind of turned out like a Cure song, and you even got Robert Smith like from the Cure doing a remix like on like the deluxe version, but I just don't really hear it too much. I mean, yeah, I guess it sounds a bit like A Forest, but it's not really doesn't really sound like the Cure for me personally, and it's just a bit boring, I think. So yeah, I will give it a 7 out of 10. It is okay. I wouldn't skip it necessarily, but I do think it is among the weaker tracks from the album, and a really poor choice like as a single. It was just one of those. It didn't get me excited for the album at all, to be frankly honest. Okay, next Next up is Dead to the World. Now this is a rather sad and I guess slightly wallowing track, I would say. Noel, however, does rate it highly though. He has described this as one of the best songs that he's ever wrote, and a lot of people do tend to agree. A lot of people do seem to be really raving about this track. For me, I think it's really, really good. I think it is a top quality song. I maybe just, I don't know, it's maybe just a bit too down for me. Like, I don't quite know. I mean, but it is a good song though. It's nicely constructed, you know. Like, it's kind of the way the kind of like the song builds up, I think, is really clever. It kind of, he teases out the chorus like at the end of like the first verse, but then he then does another verse before you actually get the chorus. So I think it's quite nicely put together, and then some great lyrics as well. Like, it's time to let go and bent over backwards, but if love ain't enough to make it all right, leave me dead to the world. And Noel's kind of singing right at the top of his like vocal register. It sounds a very heartfelt and kind of like emotional performance, and you've got some really good like instrumentation on here, like not only like the orchestra, but you've also got, I think it's like an accordion going on like as well, just gives it a real kind of like an isolated kind of feel, like this track. But I do, I guess, have an issue with, I guess, its placing like on the album. I don't know if it's just because it's following Pretty Boy, which isn't one of my favourites on the album, if I may be wanting something a bit more upbeat, but it almost feels like this song should be a little bit later on, like on the album. Feels a lot more like a side 2 kind of song. It was also chosen like as a single as well, which I think was a slightly puzzling choice. You know, it certainly wasn't a song which was ever going to get like any like radio airplay, but it certainly made a good impression. Like, not least of all like on like his brother Liam, like you said. Like, how can such a mean-spirited little man write such a beautiful song? So even Liam likes this track and like really rates it, and so do a lot of Oasis fans. And I do, yeah, really, really like it, but maybe just not quite a favourite yet. So I would give it a 9 out of 10 overall for Dead to the World. Next up is a really, really great song, Open the Door and See What You Find, which is just a wonderful, wonderful track. It is a bright, breezy song, this. Great kind of orchestration on this again. Very George Martin-esque, like in like its arrangement. You've got like uplifting bells and these kind of swirling violins. It's just full of optimism, this track, and like great lyrics like sunrise in the palm of your hand, think twice, don't put your head in the sand. And it's just a kind of like, again, I like the contrast between those kind of breezy verses and then this kind of pre-chorus where like the beat kind of gets a bit more like intense, and then yeah, again, just this soaring chorus. I think it's just works really well. It's a masterful arrangement, and it's just, yeah, it feels really retro, but and really familiar, this song, like in like some ways. But that's just the mark like of a great song, I think. So yeah, like Open the Door, See What You Find, brilliant track, and for me would get a 10 out of 10.
If only you and I could try to turn the page.
Okay, next track up on the album is one that we are kind of like familiar with already. It's Trying to Find a World That's Been and Gone, which was released as a Record Store Day single a couple of years back, albeit like in like a demo form. But to be honest, this album version doesn't sound too different like from like the demo. I mean, yes, he's added like a kind of like an orchestra like on here, but it still feels essentially like the same kind of song. And I guess when it came out originally, I wasn't too keen on it. It's put it on, yeah, it's quite nice, but it's never been a favourite of mine. It starts off, I guess, with the kind of like the signature kind of like Noel Gallagher, like acoustic guitar chords, and he's even stole a line like from like a previous song, like the "Cold Against My Shoulder" phrase was from like the "Dying of the Light" like originally. But I guess aside from that, lyrically, it's quite nice about sort of about someone helping him like through like a tough time. So there's some great lines like you give me the will to carry on in a place where I belong. We're just trying to find a world that's been and gone. And yeah, I mean it's a nice track. It just feels a bit, I guess, unfinished a little bit. But I suppose that's the point. It is just part 1. But like at the same time, I guess there's not enough there to make me really keen to hear what part 2 like would be like. To be honest, it's more like a linking piece like on the album. I think like in some ways it's there, it's nice on the album, but would I ever play it outside of the album? Probably not. So that would get a 7 out of 10. Okay, next up is Easy Now, which was the second single from the album, and it was the one which really pricked up my ears and was like, this is a good song, you know. It's a very Oasis-y style anthemic ballad in a, very much a style that Noel has perfected, like, over the years. Yeah, it's very similar, like, in vein to, like, his, like, Oasis, like, kind of, like, songwriting style, which has a kind of universal feel to it, but it's not very, I guess, specific. It's kind of a little bit hard to put your finger on exactly what he means. There's some great lines on this, like, above the cities and the towns where people fly upon the ground, I stop to say a prayer for everybody there, your destination comes without a fare. And yeah, it's just a really great song, really greatly produced as well. You've got a brilliant guitar solo, which I'm not sure like who plays it. Well, apparently like David Gilmour from Pink Floyd was originally asked like to contribute this solo, but he apparently turned Noel down. So I think it's either Noel or like Gem doing it possibly. But it's a really great solo, and yeah, just the general production just gives it a real it's a real familiar sounding song this here. But again, just really great. So yeah, Easy Now for me would get a 10 out of 10. Okay, then we get the title track, Cancel Skies. Now this is quite an interesting song, like in some ways. I mean, like it was one of the singles, and when it came out like as a single, I wasn't too keen on it. Again, I was just a bit like indifferent, to be honest. But I think it works well like on the album though, like as a whole. It begins really well. You've got a kind of slightly metallic-y, kind of hollowy sound going on. It kind of sounds like hitting off like a metal bar or railings or something, which kind of, I guess, very much evokes the scene like off kind of like the council estate that like he's kind of talking about on this track. Lyrically, it's kind of about like looking back and kind of returning to like his roots. So sort of says like taking the long way home so we can be alone, catching the butterfly under the council sky, watching the world go by. And yeah, so it's quite good lyrics, but there's a very interesting video which a guy called James Hargreaves has done, which I think I might link in the description, where he essentially takes a real deep look into this song and kind of suggests that it might have been written by AI technology or otherwise a very lazy Noel, given that this track has elements which are very similar to kind of some previous like Noel Gallagher songs, so it almost gives this a kind of Noel Gallagher by numbers sort of feel to it. So the kind of like the general feel and like the chords are very reminiscent of both Pretty Boy from this album and also Rattling Rose. It's got a very similar feel like to that track. You've then got like the I Believe in Magic Love part from, which was originally from like You Know We Can't Go Back, and then like the underneath the council guys I Find You bit is from the Ballad of the Mighty Eye. So he's kind of pulled in a lot of like these kind of bits from like his other songs. I'm not sure like if he's done it like intentionally or if it's just him being lazy, possibly. I don't really know, but there's just something about the track works, you know. I think there's some good orchestration on it, and it is a good song though, despite its slightly derivative nature. So yeah, for me, would overall get an 8 out of 10. Okay, next up is There She Blows. Now this is another favourite of mine on the album. It's a song which I know that a lot of people actually don't seem to be too keen on, but I just really enjoy it. It's the title of this is possibly a homage to like the last song, There She Goes, but the song kind of has a nautical theme, basically about a kind of boat like and like its captain. So it's kind of it's quite a narrative heavy song. It's kind of style that Noel doesn't often do. You know, his songs often tend to be either quite personal or quite abstract, like in like their kind of like imagery, whereas this one is very specifically about a guy, like a captain, like off like a boat basically, and yeah, so yeah, kind of like the first sort of line like sets the scene, like the Liberty ship disappeared a long time ago. It was searching the seven seas for love. The finest commander that the world has ever known died off a broken heart. And it's, I just like the contrast between the kind of easygoing verses and then the chorus, which gets very stompy and kind of swampy kind of like chorus to it, which just, stomping beat, really infectious bass groove there like as well, which is really catchy, manages to be really catchy, but also really not annoying. You know, it kind of has a lot of replay value, this, for me. So yeah, overall, I would actually give this a 10 out of 10. I just really like this track. Like it's a great song. Okay, and then the penultimate track on the album is Love is a Rich Man, which is possibly my favourite on the whole album. It's just a nicely balanced track, this, I think, between upbeat rocker and kind of more sort of downbeat and more like melodic parts and kind of pauses for breath like a little bit, which I think the kind of two work really well together. It's also, interestingly, this track, it's got a bit of a mystery co-write on it as well, with two songwriters called E. Johnson and E. Campbell, who, like, after doing some digging, turned out to be a 60s soul duo called Eddie and Ernie. So this track perhaps might be a lift from maybe one of their songs. I'm not sure, like, if it would just be a sample. It would maybe be a bit much to kind of co-credit them, like, if it was just a sample he took. So it might be more like kind of like maybe like the whole backing track, like, is perhaps like their song. Like, I don't really know, like, but it still is a great song. But for me, the two tracks which it really like reminds me of, the drum part is I Am the Resurrection by like the Stone Roses, very much in your face kind of drum part to kick off the track, and then you've also got this kind of guitar or kind of keyboard riff which is very David Bowie-esque, reminds me a lot of V2 Schneider from the Heroes album. So these two kind of, like, all these influences combined, Stone Roses, this kind of Eddie and Ernie soul track, and kind of would just give it a really unique kind of melting pot like of like influences, and then some really good lyrics on it as well, like for all the love, the power and glory, every time we kiss, heaven is here, you are the star of my favourite story, and if I confess, let me be clear. So it's just another really good uplifting song for me, which I would give a 10 out of 10 to. Okay, and then we close the album with a Think of a Number. Now this song is, I think it's the longest track like on the album, but it's a really, really strong track. Has a kind of new wavy sort of feel to it, a little bit David Bowie Ashes to Ashes in there, like as well, like at the very least, like on like the introduction. And I guess lyrically perhaps could be inspired by the pandemic, with lines such as, right now the people are dancing while the world slips away, there's no time for love or romancing, and there's nothing more to say. I mean, it's a good song. It's maybe not quite as instantly memorable as some of the others which have come before, but there's a great production. I love the bridge where it kind of like it goes like into like a kind of slightly different direction like that. Forgive my indecision bit is really, really, really great, and the kind of production on this and the touches on it really come out like on like the vinyl version, like in particular. Noel has also said like in like an interview that if he was to kind of redo this album, that he would actually put this as the opening track, and like he was going to make this the opener, but it was too late, like he'd already sent it off like to like be like produced. But I completely disagree and think that this wouldn't have worked like as an opener, because it's just too long. It's almost 6 minutes, there's 2 sets of solos in it, and I just think like as an opener you would have just got a bit bored of it, to be honest. But like as a closer it just works, because it's wrapping up the album. You kind of it just got a kind of conclusive feel to it, I think, and also like to do that, like I'm Not Giving Up Tonight is just the perfect opener for this album, like as well. But no, it's a great closer, this one, which perhaps like growing me like even more, like I might be tempted to bump this up to like a 10, but no, for now I'm giving it a 9 for Think of a Number. Okay, so overall this album would score 90%, so I think this is a really, really strong album. It definitely exceeded my expectations, and that's possibly, I guess in some ways, like the benefit like of releasing a couple of like slightly dud and disappointing singles like from here, like when like the whole album comes along, it just blows you away, and that's possibly what's happened here, you know. Maybe in terms of its style and its kind of like how he's approached it, it's not quite as adventurous as Who Built the Moon, and it's possibly what I guess you could call safe and predictable. But for Gallagher, I guess that's a fine place to be, you know, seeing as he still has this immense talent for writing very much like instantly memorable songs like here, very melodic songs, but also very passionate songs, and songs like from like the heart. I think on the album there is generally a nice balance in terms of style and sound between sort of ballads and more upbeat moments, and I think the songs are generally quite well produced and have a lot of nice orchestrations on them, very good arrangements. I just think that there is a distinct lack of rockers like on this album, you know, like almost like every other Noel Gallagher album, whether it be Chasing Yesterday, like with like Lock All Doors and like, you know, We Can't Go Back, and Who Built the Moon, with things like Black and White Sunshine, they all have upbeat rockers. This album, really aside from I guess like Love Is a Rich Man, I guess like you want to say that is like the rocker like on here, doesn't really have like any kind of like sort of like loud electric guitar based rockers. A lot of these are quite acoustic songs or quite kind of like, yeah, like more like melodic pop songs. But I think, you know, it's still a great record though, and in terms of comparing it to other albums, again, I think I still need to let this one settle in properly, but I would say it is stronger than Who Built the Moon. When I reviewed that got 89%, so it's quite close, but I would say I do prefer this. I would also probably say that I prefer this to the debut album as well. I think that album has just got a few too many filler tracks, I got it for me. But it's maybe not quite as good as Chasing Yesterday, which is the album that really got me into Noel Gallagher, and I think would be, yeah, a bit difficult like to replace it as my favourite. But no, a really strong record here, like by Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds. So I hope you have enjoyed my review, and yeah, I'll see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.